Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 168 for the podcast. When it comes to contraception, most of the innovation in the last century has focused on providing contraceptive alternatives for women. The contraceptive pill was approved by the FDA in 1960, the first IUD in 1968, and the female condom in 1993. For men, however, there's been little advancement since the invention of the rubber condom in 1855 and the first vasectomies in humans around the turn of the 20th century. Contraline is a biotechnology company that is aiming to change that record. They are currently heading into phase 2 trials with a therapy that they claim is reliable, long-lasting, easy to use, and reversible. This week, I talked to Kevin Eisenfrats, CEO of Contraline, about the challenges of bringing a new contraceptive to market, how to manage clinical trials on multiple continents, and what the world might look like if the contraceptive burden passes from women to men. I hope you enjoy our discussion. Kevin, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Kevin, tell me a little bit about your background, because I saw on your LinkedIn that you founded Contraline while you were still an undergrad at the University of Virginia. How does that even happen?
Well, it goes back well before going to the University of Virginia. I went to a medical high school in Neptune, New Jersey. I've always wanted to be a surgeon. And even at a young age, I think I was around 16 years old, I realized that I wanted to go specifically into women's health or reproductive health. My original path was I was going to be a gynecological oncologist. I've always wanted from an early age to figure out how to help women. And also reproductive biology just fascinates me. There's so much that we don't know about it. When I was around 17 years old, I actually realized that one of the biggest problems in reproductive health was the lack of male contraceptives. I was watching this show on MTV called 16 and Pregnant, and I was realizing that there were all these men that were like, oh, I didn't wear a condom that one time, or my condom broke. And, it changed their entire life to have a child at the age of 16. And I realized that if men just had better male contraceptive options and condoms, I think we would prevent so many unintended pregnancies. And I wrote my essay to get into the University of Virginia on why there's no male birth control. When I got to UVA, within 2 weeks, I was introduced to a professor named Dr. John Hare. And Dr. Hare was a really well-known scientist in the field of reproductive biology. But what's really quite unique is he was an entrepreneur. He had started 4 companies all out of his lab at the university. And one of those companies was actually the first at-home sperm test. It's like a pregnancy test. It's an in vitro diagnostic to measure sperm count. And today that product is called Sperm Check Vasectomy and Sperm Check Fertility. It's still sold on Amazon and Walgreens and Boots and all over the world. But that came out of a basic science discovery at our lab at UVA, commercialized into a product. So I started doing research with him for 4 years in IVF, also some drug development in specifically in developing an antibody drug conjugate for cancer. And I was still on the path to med school. I was applying to med school as my 4th year of college. And out of nowhere, I get this email that's like, are you a biomedical engineer and interested in entrepreneurship? And it's not something I've ever considered before. Like, I actually, to be honest with you, the word entrepreneurship never crossed my mind. But I was like, but this competition at UVA, it's like $20,000 if you win. And I was going on a ski trip with my dad at the time, thinking of ideas I could enter this competition. And I knew that Dr. Hare was working on this grant to create a contraceptive for cats and dogs. And I was like, well, what if I could create a contraceptive for cats and dogs that is better than neutering? And what I knew at the time was that there was this work being done in India on a male contraceptive that was an implant that would go in the vas deferens to block sperm. And it's been researched for decades. There's all these papers on it. It's called RISUG, RISUG. And I was like, what if we could create a version of Rysug for cats and dogs? Long story short, I ended up winning the entrepreneurship competition, first place with that idea, and won another competition after that. And throughout that process, one, we got about $50,000 in competition money. And two, more importantly, I discovered this is really cool. This whole, like, I'm good at pitching. I like entrepreneurship. I created my first pitch deck ever. Let me just take a gap year from med school and see if I can like start this company. And Dr. Hare was super supportive because he was an entrepreneur himself. He was like, let's do it, Kevin. I'll start this with you. We were the first team in UVA's history to take that money and put it into our lab at UVA and start the research. And then within 3 months of starting the company, I realized I'm not going to med school. Like, I'm going to do this full time. And Contraline was born. But also what's interesting is that within 3 months of starting the company, I had all these veterinarians and pet owners be like, yeah, this is really cool, but like male contraception, can I have that product? Like, forget about my cat and dog. Like, that sounds amazing. You know, why doesn't this exist for me? And we basically realized like the writing on the wall, the opportunity here is for humans. So 4 years after I wrote that essay on why there's no male birth control, now I'm starting a male birth control company. So that's how Contraline got started. 10 years later, we're now, you know, I've been running this for 10 years. And we're by far the most advanced male contraceptive company in the world. We have 2 products in our portfolio. Both are in late stage clinical trials. And I know this has been a long-winded answer, but it's incredible to see how far we and the field has come, because in 2015, when I started Contraline, there were 0 venture-backed male contraception companies, and there were actually 0 non-hormonal male contraceptives in clinical trials. Today, there's a couple venture-backed male contraceptive companies, and more importantly, there's, I think, 3 male contraceptives that are non-hormonal in clinical trials and a couple other that are hormonal. So the whole field has just really come a long way in the last 10 years. There's sort of been a resurgence.
I want to learn a little bit more about the solution that you've got there. For people who aren't that familiar with Contraline, what exactly is Atom, this flagship product that you've got?
So the idea is really to create the first long-lasting, non-hormonal and reversible male contraceptive. And if you look at what's available right now for men, it's really condoms and vasectomy, right? And that's it. And vasectomy is a phenomenal procedure. It's extremely safe. It's easy to perform. It's extremely effective. Actually, vasectomy is the most effective contraceptive in the world, but it's basically not reversible. If you want to get a vasectomy reversed, it's a 2 to 3 hour long microsurgical procedure with no guarantee of success, and it costs anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 out of pocket. So it's not really reversible. The idea is like, what if we can implant a gel, this biomaterial, into the vas deferens? So it's sort of similar to a vasectomy in that it's blocking the sperm from traveling through the tubes, but also that gel is not going to be permanent, and it can be reversed, whether that's through degradation, where that gel doesn't last forever, or if someone changes their mind, we can remove the implant and restore the patient's fertility whenever they desire. In that way, we're positioning Atom as really more of the IUD for men than like a vasectomy alternative.
How does it actually work to block the sperm in the van deferens? Is it just taking up space? How does it work?
So, you know, the vas deferens, the only function of these tubes are to transport sperm. And it's basically like a peristaltic tube, and it's transporting hundreds of millions of sperm during ejaculation. And what we're doing is we insert this tiny little gel. It takes up a couple centimeters of the vas deferens. And that gel is just it's basically a mechanical approach or a physical approach to blocking the sperm. The sperm are on average 3 microns in diameter. They're very tiny, but the pores of our gel we're talking about like 10, 20 nanometers. So orders of magnitude smaller than sperm. So literally the sperm are going up against this gel and being blocked. Now, what's really quite interesting is the gel is also dynamically responsive. What does that mean? It means that as the vas deferens expands and constricts, so does the gel. It moves along with the vas deferens, so it's not letting sperm get around the implant either. Now, the first question I get around this is, what happens to those sperm that are blocked? Does that cause a backup of pressure? Does that cause any safety issues? Well, our own bodies, the male body, is actually constantly recycling sperm. That's something that happens. We're breaking down sperm and absorbing those remnants. And that's something that happens in everyone's body. And it happens after a vasectomy, where it's a permanent full occlusion of the vas deferens. That vas deferens is cauterized or severed in half. With what we're doing is we're doing the same thing, except the gel is actually absorbs fluids. So it does allow the sperm to be blocked while allowing some of that epididymal fluid to travel through. Now, there is we are not seeing a buildup of pressure or any safety effects from our early clinical trials, or our preclinical trials. But what's really quite important is that the vas deferens is early in the male reproductive tract, if you will. So most of the ejaculatory volume comes after the vas deferens from the prostate, the seminal vesicle. So the Atom hydrogel actually doesn't have any effect on the volume or sensation or pleasure. It's just blocking those tiny little sperm cells from going through.
And you said what the real game changer is here is that it's reversible. Compared to a vasectomy, which you said is expensive and maybe not 100% possible to reverse, or something like RISAG. How does Atom compare, and why do you say it's reversible? What makes it reversible?
So the biggest innovation behind the Atom hydrogel is the hydrogel platform. Like, hydrogels have been around for, and really have taken off in the last couple decades. There are a couple dozen FDA-approved biodegradable hydrogels on the market. So things like Spacer from Boston Scientific, Progel, Duraseal, CoSeal, all of these are degradable hydrogels. The problem with those gels is that if you put them in the vas deferens, for example, they would degrade really quickly. They usually last for a few months, maybe 6 months at best, but they also degrade linearly. So what does that mean? They degrade over time. If that means that someone would have, contraceptive efficacy for weeks, someone else for months, someone else for maybe a little bit longer. The innovation behind Atom is that we designed a gel that is really stable and not degrading linearly until the whole thing is ready to degrade, and then the whole thing collapses and it goes through what's called bulk degradation. What that means is we can actually tune the hydrogel and make it last for however long we want it to last for. Do you want a 1 year long gel? Do you want a 2 year long gel? Maybe one day we'll have a 5 year long hydrogel. So we can actually control the lifespan and when that thing begins to degrade in the body. And once it starts degrading, it happens really quickly. So that gives us the predictability. And the idea is that someone can come in every couple of years for a new hydrogel, for a new Atom procedure if they want. So that's the biodegradation of the Atom hydrogel, combined with the fact that it's really safe and not causing fibrosis or any other inflammatory response in the vas deferens, is what allows for this to be truly reversible.
Contraline, as I understand, has also licensed a hormonal gel to complement Atom. How do these things work together?
So the Nest, you're referring to the Nest product.
That's right.
That we just announced. So this is huge, right? Let me take a moment and share this with your audience. Contraline, we in the last year have been working with this group called the Population Council and the NIH, believe it or not, because they've been on a hormonal male contraceptive. So Population Council and the NIH developed this phenomenal product called Nest-T. And Nest-T, it's a daily transdermal gel that men apply on their shoulders and sort of upper chest area. And as long as you apply it once a day, doesn't really matter what time of day, it basically suppresses the sperm production. and it's fully reversible. And these two organizations, they've spent now, well over a decade, maybe almost 2 decades at this point, developing this product, getting it through a phase 2B trial. They just finished phase 2B trial had phenomenal safety, efficacy, and reversibility in 462 couples. So this is by far the most advanced male contraceptive in the world. And then they announced that they were looking for a partner, and Contraline, started discussing this with them, and we were blown away. We think this product is game changing, and we decided to license it. And so Contraline now will be, we're preparing to run the phase 3 clinical trial for the Nest-T gel. And by the way, that will be the first phase 3 trial on a male contraceptive in history. So quite exciting. Now, where does this fit into our portfolio? Our vision is that, and our belief is really that male contraception is going to be very similar to female contraception, where it's not a winner takes all market. Couples want to choose from different options at different points in their life. Just like a lot of women may start out on the pill in their teenage years, they might switch to an IUD in their 20s. They might go back to the pill, or they might eventually get, a tubal ligation when they're done. Men need multiple options. And by having a long-lasting, non-hormonal option, which is Adam, and having a daily topical reversible gel, which is Nest-T, we basically can give men 2 incredible options. Do you want to do something every day, but you don't have to go get a procedure done? Or would you rather go get a procedure and you don't have to think about it every day? So it really opens up the entire market for us. And we think that we can really, I think that we can kind of create the entire male contraceptive industry, honestly, with these 2 products.
You've talked a couple of times already about clinical trials. I want to talk about the trial for Adam, because that was a phase 1 trial. It was in Australia, so my home country. It involved about 25 men, and it showed a 99.8 to 100% reduction in motile sperm within 30 days. And then with up to 2 years of protection after that. Can you just put those sort of results in context for me? I know there haven't been very many clinical trials to compare them to, but how does it compare to other contraceptive methods for men?
Well, that's an easy question. There really are none except vasectomy. So how does it compare? Let me tell you a little bit about that clinical trial. So the ADAM study was a first-in-human trial. There were 3 sites in Australia. We recruited 25 patients, 25 subjects for that study. Now, first, let me say, I love working in Australia. And your home country is obviously amazing. I've had the chance of visiting many times for the study, and the demand was off the charts. So for 25 patients, there were 1,500 men who wanted to be in the study and filled out a pre-screener survey to be in the study. So actually, we had patients calling left and right, upset when we fully enrolled the study that they couldn't get in. The purpose of the study was really to look at safety first and foremost. No one's ever put a hydrogel into the vas deferens before. Rysug was in India, but that was a injectable styrene maleic anhydride polymer. It's like a plastic almost. There's no one's actually put a biodegradable gel in the vas deferens. So we wanted to look at is that safe, and can we do the procedure easily? And what we found is we did all 25 procedures very easily. The gel was able to be implanted. And by the way, these are urologists that do some vasectomies, but they're not the top vasectomists in the world or anything. They're not doing thousands per year. They were able to get the gel in the vas deferens easily, no complications from that. The safety is phenomenal. What we see is very mild adverse events that are very similar to post vasectomy, which is the funny expression, it's a lot of guys who get a vasectomy just use a bag of frozen peas for a day or two. It's kind of similar to that, and you're well on your way. You could be in work the next day or 2 days later. We're playing basketball, and so the safety and recovery period was very well received. And then we started looking at efficacy because that's what we want to know is like, could this work? And what's amazing about male contraception is before you even look at pregnancies, you can just look at the sperm count and just see if the sperm are going to zero, this thing is working. It's doing its job. And with a vasectomy, it takes anywhere from like 2 to 6 months to get to zero sperm count. Usually urologists tell their patients, come in at month 3 for your first semen analysis. And if that's still not zero, come in for a second one at month 6. We started testing, but in dogs, we saw that this was working within 2 weeks. So we're like, well, maybe in humans, this will start working that quickly as well. So we did our first semen analysis at day 14. And most of the men in our study, like I think almost everyone except for like 2 patients had zero sperm count on day 14. And those other 2 were zero sperm count by the second semen analysis on day 30. So really what we're very, very encouraged that ADAM could work, that it is working quicker than potentially a vasectomy. And then we started following those guys out to 2 years because that is the desired time frame. And we now have publicly announced that we had our first few patients reach that 2-year mark. So this thing can not only is it safe for 2 years, the men, no one dropped out of the study. They loved being in the study. They loved the procedure, but also it seems to be working for 2 years. Of course, we don't have enough data to make that claim yet, but we're really excited with the proof of concept that we have.
One of the things I read when I was preparing to talk to you today was an article in The Guardian which said there are essentially no serious adverse effects, and there was a quick 10 to 15 minute minimally invasive procedure to get ADAM in there. Can you walk me through what that implantation process is? Is it something similar to a vasectomy?
It's almost identical to a vasectomy. So there's something called a no scalpel vasectomy, which is sort of the most common technique that's used for vasectomies today. And a vasectomy, by the way, for your audience, is something that is really a urological procedure. So every urologist knows how to do vasectomy, and some urologists really focus heavily on vasectomy as one of their main procedures. And then also what I've discovered in the last few years is, especially outside the US, a lot of GPs do vasectomies as well. I've met GPs in Canada, Australia, who do thousands per year. In Australia, there's a guy named Dr. Snip. I don't know if you've heard of him, who I think has like 7 or 9 private clinics, and they're just like doing them in 7 minutes, right? And cranking away. So anyways, back to your question. The no scalpel vasectomy is the same technique that we do for ADAM, where the doctor basically identifies the vas deferens, which is in the scrotum. They bring it closer to the skin. They inject local anesthesia to numb up the area, or sometimes there's even a no needle, no scalpel vasectomy where they basically use this like pump to spray the local anesthesia, which is awesome. You don't even have to use a needle to inject it. That's the only part that, doesn't hurt, but once you do that, the guy doesn't feel the rest of the entire procedure, right? Then they make a tiny little incision. And they're not using a scalpel to make that incision. They exteriorize a couple centimeters of the vas deferens just so they can see it. If this was a vasectomy at this point in time, they would basically ligate, cauterize the vas deferens. But with our procedure, they cannulate the vas deferens. What does that mean? They take a small over-the-needle catheter that's normally used for blood draws, and they insert that little catheter into the lumen of the vas deferens. Once they do that, we've created a really simple way to confirm they're in the lumen of the vas deferens, so they're not missing the injection. And then they hook up we created a really incredible delivery device that injects the hydrogel. And that delivery device ensures the same amount of gel is going into the vas deferens at the same speed, et cetera, et cetera. They press a button, the gel is injected, the gel, that catheter is removed, the vas deferens is put back under the skin. And because that tiny incision was so small, they actually don't even use sutures to close it. So they do the same procedure on the other side. There's 2 vas deferens, and then the patient, can walk out. So it's really everything I just described to you happens in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, and
And
that was all part of your phase 1 trial.
yeah.
But you're moving forward into phase 2 in Australia again?
Yeah, so it's really quite unique. I can't share too much about this, but we have made some incredible advancements to the Atom hydrogel over the last year with some of those learnings from the first in human study. And that's what I love about medical devices, by the way, is like you can use those early feasibility studies to continue to improve the device, get it to its sort of final form before you run your pivotal trial. So we've been able to simplify the procedure even more than what I just described. We've been able to figure out how to manufacture the Atom hydrogel for 90% cheaper. There's less components involved, but long story short, we've made some incredible advancements to the product. And now we're going to our early feasibility study where we're going to test the improved version of the product. And then on top of that, we're also going to show reversibility for the first time. What do I mean by that? We're going to remove the implant and show fertility come back to normal levels, which has never been done before. If we can show that it's safe and effective, I mean, we've really hit, checked every box. This is last 2 years. It's safe, it's effective, but also we can remove it. From there, we'll then do our pivotal trial to get FDA approval.
You say you're going to remove it, but the idea in the long term is that it degrades by itself, right? It doesn't have to be removed.
Exactly. But we would love for it to be a double whammy, right? We would love for, if someone does change their mind, we want there to be a 10-minute procedure to implant. So that's the goal.
So let's talk a little bit about the market, some of the challenges and some of the successes that you've had, because really you talked about this big demand for your phase 1 trial in Australia or huge interest there. But you've now got thousands of men on a wait list to be involved, and particularly in a world that's post-Dobbs decision, there's a real interest in male contraception. Who is the primary market here? Is it men who are younger? Is it men who are older? Is it men who've already had children? Who are you aiming at?
So the demand that we're seeing is quite large. And what we see is really anywhere from, 21 to 39 years old is sort of the peak demand. A lot of these men themselves are quite interested, so they want more control over family planning and more responsibility in family planning. But sometimes you also see men who, they want to be better partners. They understand that their partner has been using birth control for, a long time and might have side effects, or maybe is contraindicated for hormonal contraception. So he wants to take on that responsibility on sort of behalf of the couple. So we see both sides. We see typically the men that are in their early 20s and late 20s, they lean towards a daily option like Nest-T, that transdermal gel that I described earlier. The men that are in longer relationships, they're usually in a serious monogamous relationship. They maybe they're engaged or just got married. They tend to prefer Atom because they're in more of a stable relationship, and they would rather get a set and forget procedure than have to do something every day. But overall, I would say demand is quite high. We think that the market for male contraception in the United States alone is, there's, I think, around 40 million men that would be willing to try a new male contraceptive. And the early adopters, there's probably around 17 million men. So, if you go out on the street in the US today and survey men, I guarantee you about 1 in 2 men are going to try one of our products at some point in the future.
You said about 40 million men. That number comes out when we talk about funding as well. You've raised about $40 million from investors so far. Have you had any challenges actually advancing male contraception, even with that money behind you, regulatory hurdles, or maybe just even social stigma?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. Male contraception is not an indication in that you hear about every day. I can't tell you the number of investors that I've talked to, and they're like, we have literally never thought about this problem before. Like, you are the first person to pitch us this market, this opportunity. And it requires a lot of work to educate people on the interest and the demand. And frankly, I'm not going to lie, a lot of investors even doubt that men are really going to use these products. And it's just like, it makes very little sense because there's so much great market research out there that's been done on this that definitively says that men will use this product. We also have a waiting list of tens of thousands of men. We also have recruited for clinical trials with literally zero problems, and to the point where we have waiting lists to get into our clinical trials. I mean, I've done focus groups. I mean, every day men email me saying they want to use our products, and like the demand is really there. It's like but overall, I mean, even though we've raised that level of funding, every time I've gone out to raise money, I've had to find investors at different stages of the company. So in the early days, before we had any clinical data, we had Founders Fund lead our seed round. Now, Founders Fund, they don't do a ton of biotech investing, but they love moonshot ideas. They love things that don't exist in the world, and like, what we call 0 to 1. And so they were like, wow, well, if this exists, this is going to be huge. You can own an entire male contraception industry, right? And so Founders Fund led our seed round and saw that, they saw the potential for this before really anyone else. As the company progressed, we had an amazing VC fund called MBX Capital lead our Series A. They're really focused on planetary health and global health. And they saw, okay, like they see the demand, they saw the great preclinical data we had, and took the risk that we could get to that clinical trial stage. Once we had some clinical data, we started appealing to investors like GV, Google Ventures. They looked at the early clinical data and said, okay, the demand is there, but also this is going to be incredible for women's health. GV has some investors there that really care about advancing women's health. And without a doubt, male contraception is going to be good for women by having women have to suffer less from the side effects of birth control, reducing unintended pregnancies. So we've appealed to generalists and deep tech investors. We've appealed to women's health investors, life science and med tech investors. We've got family offices. We've got NBA players. I mean, really a wide variety of investors have supported the company, but it has not been easy because there's no one investor out there that says, yeah, we invest in contraception or in male contraception, and we want to take on this entire company and fund it to FDA approval.
Is there any pushback when it comes to the idea of men taking control of contraception? Because the figures that I saw said that men are somewhere around 13% of contraception is male controlled. It seems to be an area where traditionally, whether for medical reasons or social reasons, it's been something for women to consider. Has there been any pushback because they think, well, maybe men just won't do this?
So, I mean, I'm sure some people think that, but what the data says is quite the opposite, right? So there's two driving factors. One is, believe it or not, that a lot of the men who want our products are actually already using male contraception, and the fact that they're predominantly using condoms as their main form of contraception. So what do I mean by that? I mean, imagine a couple in their 20s who is monogamous, but they're still using condoms, right? Even though STI prevention is not a concern for them. Well, most people do not like using condoms, and by the way, condoms have a 13% failure rate, which is really high because most people don't use them correctly every single time. And so 13% of people who use condoms for 1 year will get pregnant. Because of that, there's actually huge demand from those types of couples in what we're doing. Then there's the couples where she's contraindicated or has severe side effects from her birth control. And there's trends right now to move away from hormonal contraception for women. So I think that male contraception is, once it exists, I mean, I think it's going to be very hot topic. And I think that there's going to be lines out the door for men to get it.
Let's look a little bit ahead now. You're aiming for eventual FDA approval. What do you predict for this male contraception market in the next 5 years and the next 10 years, particularly for non-hormonal options like Adam? Is it going to go from 0 to where?
I really think that, I know you asked about non-hormonal. What I will tell you is I think that similar to female contraception, which the hormonal, the pill came out first for women in 1960, which was hormonal. And by the way, most options for women these days are hormonal still. I think we're actually going to see Nest-T, which is Contraline's hormonal product, come to market first, only because it's one trial away from approval. And we already have a really good idea of what the safety, efficacy, and reversibility looks like. So it's also going to be somewhat easier to distribute that as a monthly, topical gel. What we're going to see is Adam is going to come on the market very soon afterwards. And so overall, there's going to be 2 male contraceptives, FDA approved and available. Well, FDA approved and also internationally, we hope to commercialize these within the next 5 years. And so what happens after that, there is one product called YCT529. It's a daily male pill that is non-hormonal in development. They're in the middle of their phase 1B study right now. And so I think there's still quite a few years away from approval. I don't know if 5 years or longer than that, but within the next 10 years, I think there will be probably 3 options on the market for men to choose from. Do you want an implantable? Do you want a daily topical? Or do you want a daily pill?
There's obviously going to be changes to the lives of individual couples and individual men, but what about a cultural level when it comes to attitudes towards reproductive equality, reducing the burden on women, which you've already spoken about some of the great health effects that could come for women just by this being available. Do you see Adam having an impact on the culture in that sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what drives me every day. I think that, when the pill came out in 1960, I mean, it literally caused a revolution for women's rights. And it gave so much power to women. It changed everything for society. Now, that's great, but it also means that for the last 60 years, everything has really fallen on women. So where is the revolution in men's health going to come from? How are we going to get men to become better partners? How are we going to get men to also care more about their own health, right? And so I think that a male contraceptive product is almost a gateway drug, dare I say, for men to get more involved in their own health and reproductive health. Also, here's another interesting thing. Women see an OBGYN from an early age, and a lot of it is because of contraception, right? But men don't see a urologist, for example, or a men's health expert or a reproductive health expert from an early age, right? Like men go see a urologist when they're older and there's a problem. So I wonder if a male contraceptive is also going to be a reason to get men seeing doctors at a younger ages, like in their teens, or slightly older. And what that's going to do is also just kind of be good for men's health overall, because once you're seeing a doctor for your male contraceptive, you might talk to them about other things you have, whether it's like reproductive health or other health issues or mental health. So I'm quite excited for sort of the overall societal revolution that a male contraception can have beyond just preventing pregnancies.
Kevin, this has all been fascinating. For people who want to learn more about Contraline, where can they go? Contraline.com.
First and foremost, we have a pretty active LinkedIn as well. We post updates weekly about how the company is doing, what are some of the big milestones we're hitting. So follow us there. We also have a waiting list. As I mentioned earlier, it's come up a couple times. So if you go to contraline.com/participate, you as a patient or a physician can get involved and follow our journey closely. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways, but really, I think if you just want to be a supporter and believe that male contraception needs to exist in the world, please reach out. We'd love to get you involved.
Kevin, thanks for joining us today on Beyond Biotech.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.